there was also another interesting connection that I feel like I made as a result of looking into the Tower of Babel, and that relates to the thesis of my take on how the Nephilim returned after the flood. And many times when I talk about the offspring of Ham and others, perhaps Japheth, producing Nephilim, people get all wigged out and they start freaking out. Especially people of color will freak out on me and say that I'm cursing, the entire race of Ham. And I have to just simply ask, do you really believe that Noah and his wife gave birth to 3 different races of people? I mean, there's this idea that Noah and his wife gave birth to white people and black people and Asian people. Really? You really believe that? I think that's a bogus interpretation of the Table of Nations. And no, my thesis does not condemn anyone. The Table of Nations is legitimate in the sense that, Genesis 10 lists out the offspring of Japheth and of Ham and of Shem, and we see through history who went where. And this is a typical chart you might see of where the descendants of Japheth went. They largely went north, and Shem pretty much stayed in this general area here, what we call the Middle East, and some say perhaps went off into Asia. In fact, there's a belief that the founder of China was somebody named Fohi or Yao, both of which are linked to the Noah of the Bible. So looking at this chart here, we see first of all that Ham, yes, he did go south into the continent of Africa, but he also went up into the regions of Japheth, and he was in the regions of Shem as well, obviously in the Promised Land. So there's that. But I don't believe that Noah and his wife gave birth to 3 different races anyway. I believe whatever color they were, and actually the Book of Enoch tells you that Noah was an albino, so that's pretty white. But if you realize that color is simply a function of melanin. What is melanin? Melanin is something the body produces to protect itself from harmful radiation of the sun. Well, it just makes sense. If you're going to move south towards the equator, you're going to get a lot more sun exposure. And guess what Yahuwah did in all of his divine wisdom and sovereignty? He put plants in tropical regions that actually increase the production of melanin when you consume them. Wow, go figure. That's just called adaptation. Now, there's something else I want you to consider. There are over 300 species or breeds, if you will, of dogs that all came from a wolf. Look into that. Look into dog breeding. And they'll tell you, yep, they pretty much all descended from a wolf. Well, I mean, look at a wolf and look at just these few samplings of dog breeds that I have here. There's a vast difference between a Chihuahua and I think this might be a Mastiff or a Great Dane or a Greyhound or a Collie or even a Dachshund. All these different breeds have vastly different facial features, body types, and yet they all came from a wolf. Why? How did that happen? Well, that happens by controlled breeding experiments, where you just continue to breed a certain trait. Once you see a offspring that has a certain trait, you set it aside and you breed some more till you get similar traits, put those 2 together, and you breed those together to reinforce those traits, and you keep doing the process until you get the look, size, and shape that you want. And so you end up creating dog breeds simply by controlled breeding experiments. Well, that's exactly what you have happening at the Tower of Babel. According to the book of Joshua and other texts, Yahuwah split up the people. All the people in the world were gathered together in the plains of Shinar, and he split them up into 70 different languages. 70 different languages and 70 different people groups. And Joshua tells you there are 600,000 men, so that's not counting women and children. However many more that may be, let's say you double that. So you got, over 1 million people all gathered together in one place, and Yahuwah splits them up into 70 different controlled breeding experiments. 70 different people groups go 70 different ways, talking in their own language. And until they could begin to understand other people's languages, they were stuck in that controlled environment with their own quote-unquote kind with them. So I strongly suspect that Yahuwah did this also with dominant physical traits in mind. In other words, whatever group went off speaking this language, maybe everybody in that group had similar, let's say, facial features. Okay, well, then if they continue to breed within that controlled people group over an extended period of time until they are able to learn other languages and start mixing again, all you're going to do is genetically reinforce that specific trait. So people with certain cranial shapes or eye shapes or nose shapes, etc., were lumped together in their own language groups. And then through multiple generations of interbreeding within the controlled language groups, those traits became, let's say, locked in, such that now Asians generally have the same facial features, which are different from Europeans, which are different from Africans, etc. And you combine this with the various foods in the various regions that people settled, and the amount of sun exposure that they may have had in those areas, and suddenly we have a wide variety of shapes, sizes, and colors, just like in the dog breeding example, all descending from one common pair of ancestors. And I think this just shows Yahuwah's creativity and how he created the body to be amazingly resilient and adaptive, and to overcome different things, to produce the appropriate amount of melanin if you're going to be living in an area that has extreme sun exposure, or if you're going to be moving north so your body can handle the cold, that it will metabolize fat differently, things of that nature. I think it's pretty easy to understand how the table of nations and the dispersion of languages creates controlled breeding conditions such that a wide variety of human shapes, sizes, and colors can easily be created. So again, no, my thesis does not condemn anyone. I'm not saying that if you still subscribe to the completely absurd and entirely ridiculous notion that Noah produced 3 different colors of people, 3 different races of people, and you're going to get locked into, oh, Rob says that Ham produced Nephilim, so he's cursing all black people. No. Hopefully with what I just showed you, you can see the absurdity of the entire argument. And I have to stress, again, no, I am not saying Ham's cursed. Canaan was, Ham was not.